So, for better or worse, everyone and their mum has heard of that one infamous TV series. The Walking Dead was honestly a pretty good show that sprang onto screens in 2010, and was probably the introduction to the franchise for the majority of people, as well as a mild sexual awakening, or even the origin for their fear of rusted car doors. Sure, it was based on the comic book series as written by Robert Kirkman, Tony Moore, and Charlie Adlard, but I feel like the TV show was really what brought it into the limelight, plus comics are for nerds. The TV series has an average score of 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the average rating for some of the worst seasons of the show never dropped further than 66%, which is extremely generous. So you have to wonder what these reviewers are thinking. Probably that they should wipe all the cum off their Daryl Dixon body pillow before their mum notices and asks them to be more careful with the PVA glue again. In my opinion, the story started really well, and then slowly got really shit, and then I stopped watching. Stephen Ogg was in it though. A few seasons too late, but he was there. Anyway, this TV show blows up, the comics blow up, and it starts reeling off lots of spin-offs. The Talking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, Chloe and Lamar, some webisodes, and of course, the Walking Dead game series, developed by Telltale Games and released in 2012. The first season was an insane hit, following the story of Lee, a convicted criminal whose crimes are never fully explored, and Clementine, his basically adopted daughter, who he must now try and nurture and guide through the horrors of the zombie apocalypse, kind of like if Frogger had a baby. From here came the 400 Days DLC, a woefully understated DLC with insanely awesome mini-stories, episodes 2 and 3, and the Michonne DLC, and then season 4, the final episode. I'm gonna tell you now, the first and last season and the 400 Days DLC are the cream of this crop. Season 3 and the Michonne DLC were fine, if not good, and season 2 was toilet water. Let me tell you why. This video is going to be the first in my series reviewing the Walking Dead video game series. The first episode will focus on episode 1 and the 400 Days DLC, with the remainder of the series and the DLC yet to come in later videos. So if it's at all unclear, there will be spoilers ahead for the Walking Dead game series, and again, if it's unclear, please like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. So to better understand the fundamentals of The Walking Dead, we need to start at the beginning, season 1. Well, if you can start it. I played and loved the Telltale definitive series of the game, so I bought the collector's edition to earn myself another cheeked up platinum trophy. And the fucking game doesn't work. Like, I purchased the physical CD and the game literally does not start. It took upwards of 20 minutes for the season select to even load, at which point I would be unable to select a season at all. I would click season 1 and be greeted with an infinite loading screen. I waited 90 minutes for this thing to load and it just never did. So I uninstalled it, reinstalled it offline, tried it with and without updates, tried it again and a few more times, each time letting it load for so long that it got dark outside, and it just never worked. So that was money well spent. In the end, I just bought the individual episodes on the PSN store and played those instead. Season 1 sees our honey-voiced protagonist, Lee, in the backseat of a police car, driving out of Atlanta to be jailed for a vaguely described but never truly understood crime. From what we can gather, Lee came home early from work one day to find his wife in bed with a state senator. Although we know the senator was killed by Lee, we never truly know whether or not it was on purpose or accidental, and he always seems to get interrupted just as he's trying to explain it to us, like when an anime character starts a sentence with "before that happens." Just hedge the first half of the sentence with something no native English speaker would ever say, then interrupt for infinite suspense and repeat. Maybe he did kill the senator, maybe he didn't. I suppose it depends on your own interpretation and relies on how you approach the game to flesh out Lee's backstory. Do you turn him into a heartless killer who walks the final episodes alone, or a merciful caretaker who saves whoever he can at any cost? Lee's police car joyride is cut short as the titular Walking Dead bumbles out onto the road, and his sheriff cohort totals the car, veering right off the highway and into the forest nearby, rendering Lee unconscious. He wakes up, sees the corpse wakes up, sees him, and he grabs a gun and pops him open like a dropped melon. I feel like these kinds of scenes, the ones where the protagonist first has to meet, understand, and deal with a member of the undead, are super hard to pull off in this media, because no one ever truly knows how they would respond to seeing a member of the Walking Dead. You end up with this weird balance between delivering an organic, reasonable, logical response, and getting a fucking move on with the story. Personally, I do feel like Lee was clearly in shock still from the accident, and was probably a bit quick to shoot the policeman, but if that was me, I reckon I would have just died. He pulls himself together fairly quickly, and bolts in a way I can totally empathize with, but wouldn't for sure know if I would be able to do myself. Lee finds himself in a backyard that, almost bizarrely, became an icon of the series and of Telltale itself. Just some dusty-ass yard with some grass and a patio and a treehouse, but it's a backyard people who haven't even played the games recognize. It's where he meets our deuteragonist, Clementine, a little lady who will reach deep into your mind, grab your parental instincts instinct by the bollocks and bring it screaming to the forefront of yourself because she's a precious bean and she is so cute. Unless you're some raging sociopath or proud cement block, Season 1 is probably going to give you a lot of feelings. It's quite a powerful experience. I think what makes it so powerful is that it features a world you discover alongside Lee. You both meet walkers at the same time. You both understand how they die. You both understand how long it's been that way, how many people are left, why they never ever change their clothes, and how they're coping. You meet characters alongside Lee, ask the questions he's also burning to hear the answers to, and solve problems with the same motivations. Zombie fiction is so established that it has its very own definitive sets of rules, so it's all too easy to just assume an audience knows it, or over-explain by jamming exposition down their throat until they bloat with annoyance. A great example is how Lee learns that someone doesn't need to be bitten by a walker to turn into a walker. The rule in this universe is, essentially, anyone who dies, regardless of the cause, becomes a walker. He learns this when a man stumbles into a bear trap, needs his leg amputated, and dies from shock. His aha moment is shared by the audience, who also probably had zero idea until this moment too. It's effective because you see the realization spreading onto his face just as the realization hits you too. You learn in parallel. This game is a patient teacher. It introduces you slowly and carefully, keeping Lee in a fairly safe, controlled situation until he meets more powerful, capable groups, and so on and on until shit really begins to get real, and by then he's kind of used to it. The people around him change and harden, allowing him to transition into someone who is proactive and effective without sacrificing believability. The game also does an amazing job at keeping both Lee and the player constantly disoriented and confused, grappling to understand what's going on. A really key way it achieves this is by pushing Lee from location to location constantly. Lee will be in a new temporary base of operations probably twice per episode. He will constantly shift his home to the next safest place, sometimes at huge personal cost, as those safe places turn out to be very dangerous indeed. You never quite get comfortable anywhere, never truly know your way around, feel like you understand your surroundings. Lee is homeless, and so are you, and he has to navigate this new lost world by picking his actions and words very carefully. I don't think there was a single moment in Season 1 where I didn't identify with at least one of Lee's dialogue choices. Every action he took or could take, I also considered to be logical, or at least the best possible action in the best interest of the most people at the time. I feel like the writers sat down and really posed some good questions. What would be the worst possible thing that could happen right now, in this moment? What would really fuck this up? What would really sow the seeds of mistrust in this little group? And in turn, they clearly got a solid few focus groups on it, and got an understanding of all the different things people would either try or say in any given situation. Their dedication to being realistic really shows. Choice might be a complete illusion in this game, but it's a convincing one, and I can at least be immersed by the discussion because subjects are being covered that I genuinely want to understand. Character relationships are affected, and you actually do care about those this early into the series, and most importantly, Clementine learns from your example. A terrifying reality that begins to squat very squarely on the forefront of your mind, looming in your peripherals every time you think about taking the easier way out of any situation. People who seem like they're about to be really important sometimes just die, occasionally even off-screen, throwing the safety of the entire cast into doubt. Best laid plans are foiled and accidents happen, introducing an uncertainty that definitely drags your attention away from the fact that the choices are definitely all bullshit, so you're dragged along for the ride whether you like it or not. The 400 Days DLC, an extra little bit of content you probably won't even know to look for unless you specifically go out of your way to play it, does this really well, probably better even, given that it's split into several mini-stories spanning maybe 15 to 30 minutes apiece, meaning that they kept on topic with zero padding and told some of the best stories of the entire series. Each story is focused on one of 5 different characters, with a central, very short, contained story to tell, each based on a different moral question. Do we see different kinds of criminals as more or less human? Would we judge our friends as we judge strangers? Would we tell lies to save feelings? Would you club some broad to death with a torch and tell her husband that you found her this way? Would we side with evil to avoid death? How long would we wait in a dangerous situation before we abandon the people we love? Each story has a different gameplay arc, for example Wyatt's, which had me so stressed that I was playing the game through my fingers, being forced to wait on a foggy road for my friend's return, completely vulnerable and completely blind. Or Vince's, which had me follow the back and forth debate of what constitutes crime, who is more evil, and then make a final decision on who to save and who to leave behind. I took this DLC on pretty reluctantly, having finished Season 1 and being desperate to experience Season 2, but I'm glad I took the time to play it. It's fantastic, especially considering how shit Season 2 was. Because they have so little time to tell a story and so little space geographically to move the characters within it, they're always so fantastically put together, with so many interconnections, cameos, and references amongst themselves that you start to get a real idea of the chronology of the place. It builds a whole world in just 2 hours of 6 episodes, and characterization is done so well. There is one grudge I have with this DLC that comes to fruition in the second season, but I'll cover this a bit more in a later video. Essentially, one of these characters, Bonnie, is characterized as a coward and a snake. She is the knowing other woman in a relationship, a willing participant in an illicit affair who hides this information from her lover's wife, and, depending on how the situation plays out, might hide the true nature of the wife's death from her grieving husband. She's unlikable. Sure, she might have reasons for what she does in a life or death scenario, but in that moment of peace, when she's being taken care of by this couple, she's a scumbag. And season 2 just kind of wants you to see her like a big sister, which becomes a theme so relentlessly shoved down your throat that you could gag on it. I didn't really get it and I found it annoying, but more on that later. At the end of the DLC, the final 6th episode involves a woman who finds this camp of survivors, and someone in my Twitch chat immediately called her a bitch, so I knew something was up from that moment onwards. But if you don't get tipped off like that, you might just end up convincing all the survivors to join you. I mean, her, the bitch woman. With the power of hindsight, you see how innocent this seems at first glance. But I do dislike that once you do know, you realise how impossibly hard it is to put the 5 survivors off. You can't walk into the camp and come off like some raving loony or utter creep. You have to go in there with the 3 incredibly deep options of sternly nice, compassionately nice, or reassuringly nice. There's no real deviation at all besides the fact that less people will come along if you manage to seem a bit weird. So this may as well have been a cutscene really, like so much else in the series. Like all Telltale games, there's no real choice, but it's the rich storytelling and characterization that at least makes you feel like there is choice. For me, in Season 1, it made the choices really hard. Ooh, do I leave Carly to be grabbed and dragged to the floor by a walker, or do I stop Doug from being yanked through a window? It's like Sophie's Choice. In the season's credit, there were only a few choices that had absolutely zero effect. I'm talking choices that didn't even change the dialogue, so even if you picked the goody two-shoes decision, you'd still get shouted at as though you dropped the baby into an easy bait. Like on Herschel Green's farm, in the very first chapter of the very first episode, you're asked to choose between saving his son from being dragged through a fence or plucking Duck out of harm's way. Well, I thought, Kenny is here, so he'll grab Duck, which leaves me free to grab Herschel's son. So I go to help Herschel's son, I do my best, but he's mortally wounded, and he dies telling his father how much I tried to help. And then Herschel turns around and tells me to get the fuck off his farm. Okay, thanks a lot, old man. And later, when Duck is bitten and the time comes to put him out of his misery— What? What's that noise? Oh, it's Twitch chat screaming at me in full capitals to kill him myself, hungry for the blood of a 9-year-old. Jesus, this was the first game I've ever played where I formally had to ask chat to stop wishing death on children. Sure, you can dislike a character, but the rabid crowds I had in Twitch chat, screaming, frothing at the mouth, telling me to tie him up and throw him into a crowd of undead like a kiddie grenade, really wore me down. I found Duck to be a great character. He's the perfect example of a 9-year-old. He's impulsive, loud, eager to please, he likes to play games and talk to his friends, and yeah, he's an idiot. Of course he is. He has no concept of consequence, so he just does stuff and things happen and oops, problems. But he's so unbelievably well-intentioned. It's impossible to honestly pin the blame on him for the things that happen as a result of his mistakes. And yet here I was, fielding full caps chance for me to fucking murder him. Brilliant. Thanks, chat. Honestly, it's probably just a great testament to just how good the writing is of the first season. Season 1 of The Walking Dead is no different from all the other games Telltale made mechanically. It's a shallow as fuck, poorly pinned together, dry interactive movie with zero meaningful player interaction. But what made it so good, or at least tiers above the other Telltale releases, was the writing. Even unlikable characters like Lily have their soft sides, and should you side with Lily a few times on her leadership decisions, you'll find she starts to stick up for you and defend you in times of need. She's blunt and abrasive and jumps to conclusions, but she's fiercely loyal and generous with the people who collaborate with her and treat her like an equal. Not that it matters, since she goes nuts and kills a guy anyway and then fucks off into the night, but on your first playthrough you're not going to know that, so it might actually feel rewarding to see her softer side come to the surface a little. And that might make things doubly insulting come season 4, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But the most effective character, and the most effective mechanic almost, is Clementine, your adopted daughter and the deuteragonist of the season. She's adorable, probably the most wholesome good character in the game, but very deliberately so. She almost serves as a MacGuffin, a moral ballast to keep you steady. What The Walking Dead did way better than other Telltale games is that it gives you a reason to care. It's all too easy to stop giving a shit in Telltale games and just pick the fastest, easiest choices regardless of how many people it hurts or kills. But here, you have a little girl, an absolutely adorable, doe-eyed little princess who needs to be protected at all costs and navigated through this terrifying new reality. The choices you make might not impact the ending, but you can see just how much it affects her, and it really reels you in. Clementine is a really good way to disguise the whole "we don't have the time or resources to finish the option" vibe that all Telltale games give you. You know the ones, where you're given the option to kill a man or don't kill a man. You decide decide don't kill a man, but then a small anvil will fall on his head and kill him anyway in the next scene. I didn't start to feel bitter about it until season 2, but rest assured I'll bend your ear about that when it comes to it. With Clementine, sure, the anvil would fall, but she'd have seen your mercy, and you'd know that you did a good job as a parent, even if things didn't work out. The worst is when you can tell they didn't even record any alternative dialogue for certain routes. I was as honest with Herschel Green as the game would allow me to be, but I still got the angry "stop lying" from him, which came off as a bit disingenuous. Other ineffectual choices include doling out energy bars and apple halves to members of the group. You might think that depending on who you feed, people might collapse or even die from hunger, whilst others have more energy to lend a hand in times of need. But it makes no difference who you feed and who you don't. You just get different passive aggressions directed at you for a few minutes, like when you tell a stranger at the party that you don't want to give them some of your wine. That's not to say that the choices don't feel impactful, especially the first time through the game. Season 1 does a great job of categorizing the whole cast. There are a huge variety of ages, backgrounds and motivations, with their own established relationships before you drop onto the scene like a sack of cement and get them all killed. People have pre-existing affections and resentments, their own nicknames for one another, and their own plans for the future by the time you meet them. So you learn about them through the way they speak to one another, and you naturally build a very organic understanding of the group, the individuals thereof, and how they all work together. Oftentimes you find yourself having to mediate arguments and take sides, or awkwardly sit there and be hated by everyone when you try not to get involved with a discussion that is clearly none of your business. Do you challenge the leadership of someone who makes tough decisions for the group, but lets their paranoia get the better of them? Do you put a dying child out of their misery, or push their father into taking action? Do you kill a man who's collapsed due to a heart condition and might change while you're desperately trying to resuscitate him? Do you let the group liability die, or hold out hope that he might grow and change? And if you're willing to kill the group liability for making a mistake that costs the lives of some members of the crew, how do you respond when Clementine, your own adopted daughter, fucks up so badly in the final episode that you and several other members of the team are mortally wounded, lost, or killed on the way to save her? I'm fully aware that I'm talking about these characters as though they're the cast of a sitcom, but those of you who've played the game and don't just have this video on as background noise will know how simple the gameplay is. You click through dialogue options of varying intensity with varying levels of consequence, and occasionally get set loose in single rooms to examine the environment and talk to other members of the party to get a bit of a flavour for what's going on. When shit does go down, there will be a few QuickTime events, and in their credit, they can get horrendously tough, which introduces an element of stress to the gameplay. You get just a few seconds to mash just the right buttons or answer a sudden cue, and then you probably die because you were looking away or you'd put your controller down or something. The game employs a few pretty choice jump scares and some very tense moments, but the majority of the gameplay will involve making banal conversation, bumping off items in the environment, or ominously being told that someone will remember that. I guess the main limitation of this season is just the absolute absence of choice. You could say it's a message. Truly, our paths are predestined, either through fate or predeterminism. Our choices are made for us already by factors out of our control, external stimuli that prejudice us from other courses of action. Or it's just the limitations of the tech, and honestly, that's probably just the case. The tech isn't there to account for the insane possibility that Lee might survive the rest of the series, so he dies no matter what, every time. No matter how well you teach Clementine, she'll always make that final mistake. No matter how ready you are, no matter how careful you've played so far, Lee will always be bitten. No matter how many people you save, how many relationships you nurture, you'll always embark on that final journey alone. Thanks for watching the first in my series critiquing Telltale's The Walking Dead. To summarise, it's pretty good, but honestly pretty shallow, especially once you understand the mechanics in depth alongside the limitations of the technology. Characters are the bread and butter of these story-focused games, with little filling besides, and Season 1 and the 400 Days DLC do an absolutely perfect job of making them the central focus of this season in all the right ways. Between Clementine acting as your moral ballast, to the questions posed by Ben, Kenny, and the 400 Days crew's predicaments, you have a lot of difficult choices to make that, at least in the moment, feel meaty. This review was made possible by my incredible patrons and my Twitch subs who actually voted it into existence. Thanks to McSmooth, my excellent editor, whose social links will be available in the description box below, and thanks to you. Please like, subscribe, and even comment if you have thoughts on the topic, and I will see you in the next video.
Maybe we could walk? That's fucking stupid, Bim.